Everybody wants to be in front of the camera and be a star. I'm living proof of that. But you know what? You know who makes it all worthwhile and makes it look good? It's those behind-the-scene tech people. We talked to a few of those guys and their contributions made to the golden age of local television.
My basic background was in audio and audio production. When we talk about live programming, what would be interesting is that there was a place over in northern Kentucky, the Beverly Hills, and they had a lot of class, big acts come in. And they would come over and we would do the Bob Braun show, basically, is what I did. I was a helper there. And we'd have a group come in and come into the studio for an hour rehearsal before we went on the air. And that's all you got was an hour. And I remember it was so difficult because you're so nervous, you're like, can I make a mistake? Can I make a mistake? But everything was live. You couldn't make a mistake. But if you did make a mistake, you had to slap it off. And there was a big glass window where the producer and the director would sit. And I can remember especially on the Dixon show, where the producer would look, if you made a mistake, and look back in the window. That was a lot of fun. The Paul Dixon show was funny, humorous, I should say. But one of the things that I brought from my radio days was I used, you probably heard of this, cartridge drop-ins. And so I had this big stack of carts that I used to use when I did my radio show. And I started dropping these carts in on Dixon. And I'll never forget that we had a guy that was from Wright-Patterson, came in with a moon rock. And we were showing people this moon rock. And so he goes, "This is a moon rock." And I had a cart and I went, "Oh, really?" And I kept doing it. The audience was going nuts because this was so funny. And Paul didn't kind of know what to do about it. So finally, the producer just was going nuts. Stop, 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 stop. But then when the show was over, I come down to the studio. We were like a family. And I came down and Paul said, "Whatever you did, let's do it again. Let's do it again." And I did the same thing with, we introduced this new sponsor, and it happened to be Wendy's. And Wendy's was down the street. And so Paul would sit down with Bonnie, Lou, and Colleen, and they would sit there and eat this food. We'd had the food brought up to them. I had the 2.5-minute belch cart, and I kept playing this belch cart. People went nuts. They were falling off their chairs with humor, you know. Same thing, Paul said, "Whatever you did, do it again," because he was kind of superstitious. But that show was a family show. And all of the people that did that show, when he died suddenly, I remember I had just been assigned to that show permanent. The guy had previously retired. And I was so excited because it was just a great thing. We had a live band, you know, and we'd come in the morning and do that show. And when he died, everybody thought, well, we can carry on, but we couldn't carry on.
Not without him.
Yeah, not without him. He was the guy who glued it all together. And people today still ask me about, you know, the Dixon show. And of course, I have a couple of knee ticklers and the Paul Dixon watch.
But you felt the freedom to be able to drop those in without having to check with anybody first on a live show.
Yeah.
And that came down from the producer, or it came down from Paul, or where did that feeling of freedom come
I just
from?
did it.
Oh, okay.
I was union. No, I really, I did a couple of things, and I kind of knew that he liked that. And he responded to the audience. And back in those days, and when I started to say, he was using a cardioid mic, or not a cardioid, he was using an Omni mic. And so we couldn't really get he wanted to hear all this feedback from people, you know, and audience and everything. But he was genuinely convinced when he heard the audience go crazy. That was magic. That was what he liked. And so I don't think I really went too crazy with it. But I do remember a couple of times when I got this, stop, from the producer. And Steve Woolman, I could probably tell you the same thing.
How about on the Bob Braun show?
Never on the Braun show did I try to pull one of those. And I got to tell you, a little story about that. I would do the Dixon show in the morning, and I would be assigned to Bob's camera. And Bob would come over to me and he'd say, "You ever going to come down here?" And of course, I was in a seniority situation. I couldn't bump the guy. The guy was my roommate on the road sometimes. So I said, I'll try. But when I did his show, you know, it was really great. And can I do a prop here?
Yeah.
The audience at that time was starting to change. They were starting to skew a little bit younger, a little bit older too. But when the show was canceled, he called us all to his office, and he said, "Well, I'm cleaning out my locker. If there's anything you want, let me know." So I told him, I said, "Bob," I said, "I like fire helmets," and I said, "I'd really like to have the fire helmet." And Bob said, "Well, I like to keep this one." And he said, "If I ever get rid of it, you will have it." And after he died, probably 3 or 4 years, maybe 3 years after he died, I was gone from Channel 5. His wife called and said, "I've got something for Alan to give Alan." And she brought me this. It just broke me up because that's how much he meant. And it was really interesting. Nobody else ever do that, you know? I mean, he didn't give it to his son.
Right.
When I go, it has to go to his son for sure. But I was just impressed that we were a family type of group. And that's the whole way we grew up. And a lot of technology. Technology can't replace that.
Right. What you did on the Dixon show, was it pretty much the same thing you did on the Bob Braun show?
Yeah, but on the Braun show is what I was trying to say earlier, that we had these groups coming over, and the Happenings and other big groups, and they were like 3-part harmony. And I remember I had to do this on this board didn't have the right microphones, and it wasn't quite perfect, but you did a damn good job. You tried to make it as good as you could. And I remember Ella Fitzgerald, for Pete's sakes, came in one day. And you did it. You went in there, nope, you had an hour maybe. And that was, 10:30, because the band couldn't really get going because Dixon was still going. You didn't want to have that sound working.
Wait, so the Braun show was rehearsing while the Dixon show shooting live?
Dixon show went 9 to 10, later 10 to 10:30. The Braun show went on at noon, but we tried to do like rehearsal. If you had to give a half an hour to clean the studio out. So we'd have maybe 10:30 to 11:30. So an hour to do this. And we may have, the Happenings may be singing. We may have one of the other people singing. We may have 2 other additional singers.
That's crazy.
It was. Well, it was just, you didn't have time to think about it, how great it was until it was over.
Was there any particular cast member that was easier to work with, or any particular people that were easier or understood more than others?
Well, most of them were easy. I went to school with Rob Ryder, so we were friends in college. All the people were pretty nice. I don't think I had any problem. I had more of a problem sometimes with the band, because the band would say, "Well, that didn't mix up. What mix wasn't very good." And you're going like, ah.
Any favorite guests on either show?
We really didn't have that many guests on the Dixon show. I'm trying to think of the guy. We were, when Bob went on vacation, we hired, I didn't hire, but they hired somebody to come in and do it. It usually was a name. And the guy was named Jim Stafford. Okay, spiders and snakes. Okay, well, imagine our audience is probably, median age of the audience is probably I'd say mid-50s. And so when Jim Stafford came out, nobody really knew who he was. But the horrible part was, he brought Gallagher with him. Gallagher was his road guy.
The
Yes.
watermelon guy?
Yes. And Gallagher, in front of these people, put all these watermelons out and started smashing watermelons. And boom! Now, I will say, Dixon had one funny bit that I can remember, and that's when we had some farm animals come in. And a goat backed into a woman in the front row and exploded. And that was funny, but not so.
I can't imagine being a cameraman on that, or the director saying, all right, let's cut away, let's.
Well, and Braun had the mini Mustang, the little horse about that big. And the mini Mustang apparently hadn't had any bladder training. And he had a problem in the elevator. And the setup people, I'll never forget it, they had, you know what a grass mat is? They wiped up the urine with a grass mat. And the grass mats were stored in a box with a lid on it. And they didn't use it all the time. And that was a treat.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. You made mention that you guys did a lot of creative things with on the engineering side. Can you tell us some of the things that you did, or how that affected how the program went?
The Phil Donahue show at the penitentiary. And so that was, we had to do special things there.
Sure.
And one of the things about Channel 5 was that we had a crew on the road, and we still kept the studio stuff going. So we did, at one time, we had the Dixon show in the morning, we had the Braun show or the Ruth Lyons show at noon, then they did a special, like a movie show, Vivian Della Chiesa, which is before I got there. And then we did a newscast, and then we did 2 newscasts. So when we did the interesting part about it is we had the skills to go out and get it like 4 hours before the event and pull cameras and audio and do this. And that's where our skill was in terms of the crew. And then we'd come back, and we were all on overtime, of course, and we'd come back and go into our regular studio positions.
And then, now you also were involved with doing live stuff, obviously with sports, baseball,
Yeah.
the Bengals, and with the Reds.
Yeah.
things
We
like
were one of 2 crews that NBC allowed to do their telecasts because they were a different union. And we were able to, we did, I did coast-to-coast games with, we had Tony Kubek and Kurt Gowdy and all that, and we would do those telecasts. And we also went on the road. We would, I remember doing a show for ABC with Howard Cosell in a boxing match. And the strangest thing we did was we built a complete television studio on the Mississippi Queen when we did Donahue.
I should have asked you this earlier, but live commercials.
Okay. Yeah, we did live commercials. I laughed because one of the shows that we did the most live commercials, we did an all-night movie. And we had, sponsor was a beer sponsor. Bob Shreve is
Bob
Right.
Shreve's Playhouse or something like that?
Well, that was it. They changed the name when they went to Channel 12.
Okay.
And in fact, ironically, one of the guys that worked with us went to Channel 12 and took a lot of my prop stuff with him. But that was live commercials, and everybody thought that he was drinking the beer, and he would hold up the beer glass and and never touched a drop. But during the Dixon show and the Braun show, all were live commercials. I don't think we ever had any weird things that happened at those, except, like I said, the belch cart. That was just commonplace. And the thing about Bob was he was such a natural salesman, you know, and we got it. But all of his people, like Rob and Gwen and all the people that worked that show, they could just do what he did. And they sold those commercials. It was like they were part of the family, you know, and that's what it's all about.
Okay.
But again, the control room, the crew, and that was a cohesive unit. And I remember when we did a show called Midwestern Hayride, and every night after the news was over, we did another show in the big studio where Dixon was. So they had to strike Dixon pretty much every other day to do these shows. And we would completely fill the studio with all this dancing, and it was syndicated. My experiences and my friendships with the people at Channel 5 are enduring, and it was a family, and our accomplishments were many, and it was one of the best times of my life.
A man who took over from a legend, and some say became a legend himself, Mr. Bob Braun. We hope you enjoyed some of the memories his son, TV anchor Rob Braun, shared with us. We also hope you enjoyed sharing some of the behind-the-scenes things shared by Mr. Alan Sakalas. We have a lot more conversations with many of the key players, and you can see it right here on the golden age of local television. See you then.